Good afternoon. Welcome everyone who joined us for this last reading group discussion today. This is the last one this year. And the book we're going to discuss is Charles Darwin's Origin of Species. Professor Marwala chose this book for us, and I'm very delighted with that choice, because to me, as a paleontologist, it is one of the most important books I've read in my career. I am Francois Durand. I'm a professor at the Department of Zoology, and I teach evolution as well as a lot of paleontology. Well, I actually teach zoology, but it just happens to include a lot of paleontology as well. So to me, Charles Darwin's book was one of the most important additions to my career as a young student, and I'm delighted to be able to host this session today. And I want to introduce Professor Malwala, VC of our university now. Professor Malwala, welcome here. And I would very much like to ask you, what made you decide to choose this book?
No. Thank you very much, Francois, for hosting this event, and I would like to thank everyone here who has come and to attend this session. You see, I have read many books, and quite recently I wrote a book. Leadership lessons from the books I have read, and the books I had read for that book were 50 books, classics from Africa, classics from Europe, something about the New World, about Asia. So I was quite pleased with myself. And then afterwards I reflected, because you have all these books. That are really classic, and I said, if I were to rewrite the book, which book would I exclude and which book would I include? Obviously the books that I've read. And of course, one prominent omission was on The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. I read it many times. The second prominent omission was on the origins of species. I've been very interested in artificial intelligence for a long time, and artificial intelligence in many ways, touches on the issues of evolution. Now, the simple reason, Francois, is because it's such an important book. It is about evolution, and Darwin's theory of evolution touches every aspect of our lives, whether it is the recommendation that when we are given antibiotics, we have to finish the course, whether it is what we see now with the pandemic, the new strains that keep on coming. For us to be able to understand that, we have to understand Darwin's theory of evolution. So the main reason is that is really, alongside many great books, it is absolutely amongst those.
I would like to ask you another question. When you read this book, of course, there's a lot of contention around the book, especially from fundamentalist circles. People still believe that Darwin, for instance, is the father of evolution, although many people wrote about evolution long before Darwin. Even the Greek philosophers understood that things changed over time. But the thing that I would like to ask you is, when you read the book, what was your perception of Darwin? What type of man was he, according to you? An arrogant man, a humble man, just merely an intellectual with very little feeling? Or what was your feeling about Darwin?
Well, I think we need to contextualize Darwin. because Darwin is a post-scientific revolution person. Now, the scientific revolution, which mainly happened in England around Cambridge University, and Darwin was at Cambridge University. I remember when I was a student, I had a number of lunches at Darwin College. And what Newton did, which was so influential even outside the scientific community, certainly the natural scientific community, was to look at all these mega structures, planets, and try to figure out why do they move, and is there a law that is governing that movement? And of course, many of us who studied science in the university, in high school, we still remember F is equals to G M1 M2 divided by R squared. Controversial because somebody else said it was this idea. Hooks accused Newton of having stolen the idea, but we only know that Hooks had a conversation about the inverse law. He never said anything about the mass to Newton. So this idea of explaining these mega things using a set of principles or mathematical equations and so on and so forth was really the product of the scientific revolution. And after that, absolutely everyone wanted to find natural laws to explain everything. When I was reading on the laws of on the wealth of nations by Adam Smith, I couldn't help realize that he's trying to relate things using, the square of this is equivalent to this and so on and so forth. So he was also trying to discover, the general principles of gravitation for the financial sector. And he even goes and explains some of the things like trade between two countries using the principles of gravitation. And of course, gravitation, Newton, Einstein has come and has reworked it. And then you go and read Marx. Marx is trying to do the same for society, and Marx was very wrong in many ways. But again, it was that movement. And then comes Darwin. How do we frame a complex phenomena using very, very few words, or few concepts? So that was the man of the time. He was driven by the optimism of the scientific revolution. He obviously would have been a proud man. He was at Cambridge, and those sort of environments were nurturing people who were actually quite self-confident. But he was a man who doubted himself, because you will also know that his friends had to urge him to publish because somebody else almost had the same principles that he was proposing. And he was doing it under an extreme amount of ill health. They say he was very ill. And of course, the hesitancy of him from going into the public space was also because at that time, the concept of separation of church and state was not that well developed. It was there, but it was not well developed. I mean, the head of the British society, who happened to be either the Queen or the King, was also the head of the Church of England. Both roles. I'm the head of the state, and I'm also the head of the church. The separation of church and state were not quite there. And therefore, he was fearful of the repercussions that will come as a result of him challenging what would be something that the church actually wanted. And this you should be taken within the context of the fact that earlier on in Italy, another man challenged the idea that the earth is the center of our universe, Galileo. And we know what happened to him. He was basically persecuted. So there was a little bit of a fear. He was a fearful, careful man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. That is what I take from the book as well. But since I have to deal almost on a daily basis with fundamentalists who are very aggressive about evolution and oppose evolution, but also then Darwin, one finds that many people think that Darwin was, of course, a very proud man and very arrogant and very, that he in fact attacked the church or religion. And when you read the book, did you get any feeling that that was the case, or was he actually, in that case, very careful with what he said about evolution and the church?
Well, I don't think he went into the implication of how for those amongst us who are religious. I was raised in a Lutheran church, but I would have to put it forward that I am not a religious person, but that is just part of my tradition. That he never touched on the concept of whether there was a person who designed the principles that ultimately led to the evolution of man, and other species, So it was something that those who felt that human beings came into the scene 6,000 years ago. The world was created in 7 days. There was a feeling that they are going to resist. And for me, I would say, the concept of a supreme being guiding the creation of things is not anti-science, and we don't even use the scientific methods of proving it, because if we do, we will fail time and time again. It is a matter of faith, which means it's an element of belief. If you want a proof, you are not going to get it, and whether science looks at things and say, how did they come about? So to me, I don't see any contradiction between what Darwin said and what some of the faith actually say. I don't think there is an antagonistic relationship between the two.
No, I agree with you. That's actually, I feel also after reading his book. In fact, there's the last paragraph. Maybe if we have time later on, I can put it up on the screen. It's one of the quotes I often use of Darwin. Actually makes room for you or for people who still believe in a creator God to also accept a creation, but in a natural way through evolution, but not reject God. The thing about Darwin,
and maybe if I could just add, and I'm just going to quote what he said himself in his own words. I should infer, I'm quoting now, I should infer from analogy that probably all the organic beings which have ever lived on this earth have descended from some one primordial form into which life was first breathed by the Creator.
Yes.
Now, for me, I mean, I don't want to make assumption about his beliefs, Just reading that statement, I would say that this statement was written by a deeply religious man.
Indeed, because one of the facts is that he went to Cambridge not to study zoology or biology, but in fact theology. So he had only one qualification, and it's a BA degree in theology. So in fact, he was, at least from a philosophical point of view, a deeply thoughtful man around these matters of creation or not. But what I find is so unjust is that people then accuse him of being anti-religious. And in fact, nothing in the book is anti-religious. And he wrote it for the general public, I feel, and not for scientific public as much. And he did not want to offend people, in fact. So my take on Darwin, in fact, is that he was a humble man for his standing, and because remember he was the son of an earl or something, and he still wanted to communicate with the broader public and make it understandable, these things to the broader public. Because remember, there were people like Ernest Haeckel in Germany, who did very similar work to Darwin, and then there was Lamarck in France, who also popularized evolution in France. So it was Darwin's turn to do something for his people, and he tried to do it in a very responsible way, I feel. And then to blame him for being almost a demon fighting the church is, I think, very, very unfair.
No, absolutely. I always say that whenever the matter of faith comes into conflict with science, the result has always been one way. Science always won, And what I have seen is that whenever you have that dialectic between science and religion, what normally happens, you will realize that the views that are being advocated by the people on the faith side tend to be much more contemporary views than you would think. You would not necessarily go to a script and say, this basically is contradictory to this. Of course, religious texts they generally can be interpreted in many different ways. So the fact of the matter is, the concept of the scientific method of discovering the truth is probably the best mechanism that we have now. Maybe it will be improved sometimes in the future, but at the moment, I can't think of any other mechanism of uncovering how things work. The idea of observation, the idea of constructing a model based on observation, the idea of testing that model, the idea that if that model does not explain even one single fact, the entire model has to be thrown away to the dustbin of history. I think it's a very beautiful concept, and I'm excited about this scientific method.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you. I always say it doesn't matter how beautiful your construct is. If there's one little ugly fact that destroys it, it has to be destroyed. But yeah, so I'm glad that you also came to the same conclusion as I have over the years, that Darwin actually was a responsible man, a socially responsible man, who did not want to look for conflict, but indeed tried to convey his understanding of nature. And in fact, I think that this whole first run, the first print of his book, was sold out before it even reached the shelves. Means that the society was ready to hear what he had to say. And my conclusion, and I would like to know whether you agree with that or not, is that Darwin's book was probably one of the most important books ever written in the past century even. What would you think
Absolutely.
of that?
I know, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And you know, I mean, let's just contrast it with another book that was written by another man at Cambridge, Principia. You know, Principia by Sir Isaac Newton. Beautiful book. You know, laws of motion. You know, for every action there is an equal but opposite reaction. Objects will continue at a constant speed, or unless at rest, unless acted upon by an external force. Beautiful book. But the difference between that and Darwin is because very little of what Darwin wrote has been greatly modified. You know, when you go to Principia, you know, it talks about gravitation. And gravitation was such a powerful tool. I mean, Newton actually came up with the concept of the gravitational constant. It was such a powerful tool that for over 300 years, it remained unchallenged. It completely remained unchallenged. And until obviously, this fellow also from Cambridge, a Scottish man, you know, Maxwell, trying to explain the electricity and magnetism relationship of Faraday, wrote quite complicated equations that Heaviside reduced them to 5 Maxwell's equations. It wasn't Maxwell who came up with the 5 equations. And they were beautiful equations, but they couldn't be reconciled with observations. And a Dutchman called Lorentz transformation, Lorentz, you know, Hendrik Lorentz, came up with correction factors. They're called Lorentz transformation, but they were just correction factors. And then until Einstein came up with the theory of relativity. And then really that led to the discovery of the universe, because Newton actually called his theory the theory of universal gravitation. And whereas the more complete one, which is Einstein's one, is general gravitation. So I would say that absolutely, because Darwin's ideas have not been challenged as much as Newton's Principia section on gravitation was ultimately overthrown, you know, and the better theory was put forward.
I agree with you. It's a very good summary you gave. The one thing that Darwin did not know anything about, but he was on the brink of discovering things, was the whole mechanism of heredity, because he didn't understand at the time, or nobody did, except for Mendel, of course, and he didn't understand genetics and the mechanism of how things are passed on, characteristics are passed on from one generation to the next. But now the point is different from what you just mentioned about Einstein basically succeeding Newton, is that our knowledge of genetics actually add to what we know of Darwinstein. So it actually corroborates what he has seen, and it explains better what he has observed. But his observations were all correct, and most of his conclusions too. So that, in fact, is he was a great thinker, and he just lived at the right time in the right place. And I said,
you know, I see here, Francois, that Professor Thea de Wet says no. Mendel actually wrote a letter to Darwin,
yeah,
which he never opened.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, they were contemporaries, but they never met. Yeah, sometimes you need inspiration from somebody to put you on the right course. Like Johannes Kepler wrote a letter to Newton. Newton answered him. And that's how he discovered that that planets revolved around the sun in elliptical orbits and not round orbits. And that's thanks to Newton. But that was also thanks to him answering the letter. So sometimes you have to look at your emails as well. I think I'm going to open the floor now to other people who want to put questions to you or want to contribute to the discussion. Please click on your question and answer box, and I'll be able to see it opening here on my screen. Anybody in the audience, you're most welcome. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for people to respond, I just want to add something. You probably know this, but maybe the rest of the people or some of the people here might not know this. But Darwin was one of the very few, but as you mentioned now, Newton, it reminded me, Darwin and Newton were one of the very few non-royal people who are buried in Westminster Abbey. I mean, which is like the center of British religion. And there they are, their graves are in the floor of this abbey. So it shows you that even the religious community forgave Darwin for transgressing maybe some of their beliefs on creation. And they accepted it.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, Newton did absolutely marvelous things. But some of the things that he did, which today we laugh at, was to try to construct the sketch of the Temple of Solomon, because he believed that it had some secrets, some secrets, so which basically, I mean, this is my view. I have spent quite a great deal of time thinking about the concept of religion. I used to say, there are many things that one would observe that will make one not do certain things. I mean, I'm a Lutheran, and one of the things that we do in the Lutheran Church is to drink the blood and eat the body. I'm sure people know what I'm talking about, and those are difficult concepts to comprehend. I mean, I remember my grandmother when she was baptized, and she told me up front that it is not out of conviction; it is because she just want to fit in, she just wanted to fit in, and when she was trying to explain to me that she really does not understand the sense of this, and one of the things that probably touches on that is that religion is important, simply because for a long time in our contemporary evolution as human beings, there was always this belief in something. And it is so ingrained in our ways of viewing the world that sometimes when that is removed from an individual, they really are lost in the world. Many of them are lost, So human beings are creatures of habits. Whatever you do, and you do often enough, it becomes ingrained in you to the extent that if it is removed from you, there are other psychological consequences that might result that we wouldn't want people to have.
I received here a question from Tabogo. He says, does Professor Malwala agree with Darwin that nature's productions will always be of far higher workmanship than man's production, in light of how much man has been able to achieve and will achieve in the future with regards to 4IR, particularly artificial intelligence? And I think that's a very loaded question, especially designed for you. Do you want me to repeat that, or do you want to think about it?
Yes, please repeat it.
Okay. It's that original quote you gave about Darwin, where he says that, but he says, do you agree with Darwin that nature's productions will always be of far higher workmanship than man's production, in light of how much man has been able to achieve and will achieve in future with regards to 4IR, particularly artificial intelligence?
No, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with Darwin on this one. Yes, we can be able to build a machine that can play a chess game better than a human being. But I mean, let me just give you an example of the shape of a fish. You know, if you go to these marine animals and you look at their shapes, they are designed so well that algorithms that are designed to get perfect shapes for moving things are not able to achieve those sort of perfections. And as a result, human beings now, they go and look at how things look like. You know, if you are going to design a ship, you go and look at how a fish looks like in a submarine, you know, and then do it, you know, because those shapes were designed to navigate that environment, you know. So yes, you know, you know, and in fact, in artificial intelligence, nature-inspired algorithms are very, very popular. And the reason why they are popular is because we know that if we have to construct those algorithms from the first principles, they will not be as perfect as the algorithms that we construct by looking at how nature looks like. Whether it's genetic algorithm, which now we are using to design all sorts of complicated things, you know, whether it is simulated annealing, whether it is swarm intelligence, looking at the swarming of birds, you know, the schooling of fish, to design robots that can be able to cooperate, you know. Yes, you know, in summary, nature is the best teacher. Learn from it.
Thank you. That's a brilliant answer. I love that. And although I'm not on the side of the religious lobby at all, because I'm myself an atheist, I do understand that nature borders on something almost mystical. But it's only because we don't have a concept of the time that goes into creating these things, or the evolution of things, nature creating things. Through millions and billions of years. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at this grandeur of life, as Darwin called it, but only after millions and millions of years of evolution. So if let me put a question to you. Say we have a planet floating out in space, and there's AI on this planet, and it can actually survive humankind, and humankind goes extinct, but AI continues. And you allow that to evolve by itself over millions and millions of years. Wouldn't you also get incredible things after millions of years or billions of years?
Absolutely. You know, the advantage of algorithms is that you don't have to wait for millions of years to get a perfect design that fits the contemporary environment, you know. So that is why algorithms simulating reality, simulating evolution in designing all sorts of things becomes very important, because the natural evolution is extremely slow, you know. Whereas the artificial evolution, which we can create on a computer, genetic algorithm, has been proven to be able to make robots that were not taught how to walk at all learn how to walk on their own. I mean, just think about this. How long did it take a human being to learn to walk upright? And it's still not a perfect system. That is why human beings have so much back problems, because we are subjecting our backs to a posture that has not fully evolved. I mean, that's really what it means.
I agree with you.
It has not fully evolved. So that those are fascinating things.
As a matter of fact, that's also why we get very close veins and prolapses and all sorts of things, because we were not originally designed to walk upright. It's a very unnatural pose. I have received another question here from Depo, who says, what does Professor Malwala think about his notion of struggle for existence in relation to living organisms?
Look, I mean, that is the natural law of how things actually evolve, But what is actually fascinating, and maybe it's much more complicated than I would frame it here, is that human beings have created a social system where that struggle for existence is no longer just a mission of an individual. Some people will say it's not even just human beings, that any organisms that operate in groups, there is an element of group survival, not just individual survival. So, for example, if you go to the Kruger National Park, and I don't live too far from the Kruger National Park. In fact, my village is only 30 kilometers from Punda Maria Gate of the Kruger National Park.
Are you boasting?
Yeah. So I understand it very well. If you go to the Kruger National Park, if a lion gets trapped and it loses one of its legs, it's not going to survive for too long. It's not going to survive for too long. Other lions are not going to go and hunt and bring it food. But human beings, we don't operate that way. Some people might say there is a perfectly rational evolutionary explanation of why human beings think that way, but whatever it is, it means the struggle for existence is no longer just an individual matter. I also think of the next person. If you think at the welfare system that you find in many countries, particularly in Europe, and to some extent in South Africa, it's from a maximization. Now, if I were to take the concept of Bentham and those thinkers, the idea of utilitarianism into its action, it really, it's a much more complex fitness function that is at play here. It involves individuals, it involves groups. There's a time factor into place, and as a result, we are constructing welfare states simply because we believe that just because somebody is no longer able to do the sort of hours that a young person is able to do, it does not mean they have to be relegated to the margins of society. But some people will say, no. It is actually a self-serving thing because all of us know that is our destination. So we have to guarantee that system so that when we are there, that welfare system actually catches us, so human beings, so the struggle for existence is much more complex and is not individualized.
I'm just looking at my question answer box to see whether there are other questions. Yes, I have received here a few remarks. Maybe we could look at one of them. Justin Bradfield wrote here that origin of species was actually endorsed by the Church of England, showing that God not only made the world, but make the world make itself. I think that is a very clever statement. Then he says also only later that Huxley misused Darwin's theories in what became known as social Darwinism. Have you got an opinion on social Darwinism?
Yeah, I have lots of opinions on social Darwinism. But even before I get into the social Darwinism, I wanted to actually talk about a little bit about the Church of England endorsing Darwin's work. Because the struggle, the remnants of the Roman Empire was the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church was the government. It was the government, and they constructed the system that is not too different from a much more observant government. Some people even go as far as saying that the whole concept of a confession box was an intelligence gathering mechanism, so that you can be able to know who is plotting to do what. So and then there was a struggle, and that struggle culminated with what is called Reformation. And the Reformation was led by Martin Luther, the founder of my church, Lutheranism. And what people don't realize is how much that movement actually liberated scientific thinking. Because one thing that was different about that movement of Protestantism is that it did not persecute people who did not advocate their beliefs. Certainly not with the same level of vigor as the original, as the church, the big church, the Catholic Church. So I'm not surprised, And then obviously you had and one of the books that I've read here, and it is in my 50 books that I've really enjoyed reading, is Protestantism and the Spirit of Capitalism by Max Weber. I only say Weber, and I'm corrected that it's Weber, almost like in Afrikaans, W is a V. So and by the time Darwin came, of course, there were people who were contesting whether the Church of England is really a reformed church. The Puritans were some of the people who were challenging that. So, but indeed, it had realized that instead of challenging what science is saying, you need to look at what is, from a religious perspective, what is the rational reason why what science is saying can be true. What is the rational reason why a person can possibly be born without a man and a wife through cloning? And what does it mean? When that becomes a matured technology. Now, when it comes to social Darwinism, and that is where the principles of Darwin have been completely misplaced. especially this principle, the survival of the fittest. I mean, we know about the survival of the fittest. And I'm going to quote what Darwin actually said. I can't see it here, but he said it's not the strongest, it's not the largest that survives, but it is that, here it is. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. How, after somebody has said this, we take that phrase, survival of the fittest, without actually even knowing what the fittest actually means. Because fitness, and we work with fitness function in artificial intelligence. Constructing a fitness function is one of the most challenging aspects of artificial intelligence, which basically means, and is subjective. I wrote a book called Rational Machines and Artificial Intelligence, published by Academic Press, where I actually prove that even the concept of constructing a fitness function is so subjective, So, and then because, then you had the survival of the fittest became Uberman. And we know what that led to, the German philosophy and its relationship ultimately to Nazism. So I firmly believe that when you politicize science, which is what social Darwinism actually tries to do, it tries to take scientific concepts into the political realms, that politicizing science is actually a very dangerous thing, allowing politicians, and I write about this in my book, Leading in the 21st Century, and they call that politicism, where people, even scientists, basically leave very important scientific decisions on the hands of politicians. It can lead to very dangerous consequences, and I would put social Darwinism in that basket.
Yeah, indeed, I agree with you, especially if you look at, for instance, the atom bomb. I received another question here from Stephanie Baker. She writes here, I'm not sure I agree about the idea that nature produces high workmanship. The human body is a very good example of poor engineering. The natural selection that drove our current body profile left many poor vestigial traits, like our lower backs and knees struggle with upright walking. And I see she added another question here. Survival of the fittest was not a Darwin concept, but a late addition to the 5th edition of the Origins. The term and concept was termed by Herbert Spencer nearly a decade earlier. So let's rather take the first question. Do you want me to repeat that? Or
No, absolutely, I get it,
All right.
But that question is based on an assumption that everything we see, is a finished, fully evolved object, which is not true. I mean, which is absolutely not true. Human beings, no matter how much, and obviously Darwin puts it even much more eloquently, comparing the anatomy of humans and other closely related species, that with all our civilizations, if you look at our skeletons, it reminds of anybody with eyes to see of our less than elegant beginnings, So even human beings, we have not reached by a stretch of any imagination a perfectly evolved state. And in fact, I would even go as far as saying that such a thing is an oxymoron, simply because the environment is dynamic. The environment is dynamic, which basically means that we will never be able to perfectly fit into the requirements of the environment. We will always be inadequate. We will only be inadequate if everything stands still for thousands of years and all the objects that are living today evolve to that static state. But now you are evolving to a state that is actually evolving. You can never cross the river twice. I think a Greek philosopher said, you know. So by all means, we are certainly less than perfect. The diseases that we have, our life expectancies, and what happens to many of us, is a clear indication that saying that we are perfectly evolved is an illusion, far from the truth.
I would like to maybe add to this concept a little bit. Maybe we shouldn't set our sights so high to look for a perfect human being. What about the perfect bacterium that have been around for billions of years unchanged? I think, of course, there is a great diversity of bacteria, all adapted for certain things. But some of these archaea, for instance, okay, they're related to the bacteria, they are different strain, are so primitive that one can imagine that that's what the original life form looked like. And the fact that they haven't changed over billions of years, I think, brings us very close to perfection if you're looking for perfection. But maybe you shouldn't look for big things. Maybe little things are perfect in the way they've been designed by nature. And if you look at the thousands of chemical reactions that happen per second in a cell like that, that is almost close to magical, but of course created by nature over many millions of years.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe not even, I mean, a bacteria is obviously quite a complex organism for an ordinary person. I couldn't quite explain what a bacteria is to my grandmother, who was a very scientifically gifted, but she couldn't read or write. Let's look at a crocodile. I understand that a crocodile has not changed that much. It has not changed that much over a long, certainly compared to us human beings. What is it about crocodiles that made it not to change for so long? Obviously from an evolutionary perspective, it is because perhaps the environment was much more adapted to its shape than we were. And that is why we changed, So those are fascinating topics. But one thing that is that we need to bear in mind is that these are important topics to discuss, and we should not be afraid of discussing them. We should not be afraid of discussing them. You see, I have followed the Jewish faith quite closely. Part of the reason because of many of my PhD students, and Evan Hurwitz, whom I wrote an article with, he says no. To be a rabbi, it is encouraged that you go and study things outside religion. You go and study science, you go and study anthropology, and you go and study all this, and then you can come and study. And part of the reason is because you are a teacher, and he tells me that rabbi actually does not mean priest; it actually means teacher. Which is actually quite incredible when you think about it. And because questions are going to come. And they're going to come even more complicated. I mean, now last week I was reading that there is a person who was HIV positive who has become HIV negative. I don't know whether you read the story.
Yeah,
it was on the newspaper, and now the question is, why? and if you belong to some community like my colleague, he will go to a rabbi and say, but why is this? And he will go there to try to find out a rational explanation. And I think that's what we need to nurture in our society, a culture that encourages asking questions, no matter how difficult the questions are. Issues of multidisciplinary thinking. I think that's one thing that the Americans did very well on me. The idea that an engineer must understand psychology, must understand philosophy, must understand history, is what we have to create here at the University of Johannesburg.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good answer. I received a very interesting thing here on a message here from Depo. She says, now that the VC has hosted this great discussion, we should give him a tour of the fossil caves of the cradle of humankind. Will he take up the offer? Now, I don't know whether that...
Absolutely, I will take the offer. I took my son, by the way, to the imitation of the cradle of mankind. You know that one where you go down on
Marupeng.
And I really want to see, I would really want to see the real thing, and I would like to maybe to take a few students with me, not from your discipline, because I am hoping that the people from your discipline at least know, people from different, from English majors, engineering majors, so that we can open up their mind to another world that is important to be understood.
Fantastic. Stephanie Baker also now wrote me, yeah, we would love to host you in the cradle. So this offer is firm. Many people want to see you there and take you there. Absolutely. And I feel that since, especially our specialists there, like Stephanie, know so much about the cradle and different sites, the actual sites, not Marupeng, which is just like a bunker with reconstructions in. These people actually work in the field and they do actual excavations, and they would very much like to take you there. So that's a very nice.
And Professor Henning says, please take students from education. Teachers struggle with evolution theory. I am absolutely so. I am gonna organize a group of students, and then we will go there, and then we'll absolutely enjoy it.
Fantastic. So I think this brings us to a very happy conclusion of this really interesting talk. Thank you very much, Professor, for your time and the effort you put into looking at and reading the book and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you very much. I absolutely enjoyed it. And like I said, I really regret that of the 50 books, why is On the Evolution of Species not there? By the way, it is there because I do talk quite a great deal about artificial intelligence, genetic algorithms, which is inspired particularly by this book. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for everybody who joined us today.